when we approached Shadowlands, we wanted to approach it with the utmost respect for the Japanese culture. Through the course of the months and the year that we worked on Shadowlands, there was a lot of research and just understanding of the Japanese culture to make sure that we approached our design integrity with the utmost respect for all the different types of belief, with the intentions of an entertaining show, which, we hope our guests had a great time enjoying. We also wanted at the same time approach these characters within the same kind of value and the same kind of belief and the lore behind each of the characters in a fun and, disturbing way at the same time.
Lived my life by the sword, and now I must die by the sword. Enter the Shadowlands.
The storyline of Shadowlands takes place in a time of feudal Japan, and the collapse of basically the aristocratic rule, and it's ushered in a new age of chaos, and the warring towns in the area clashed, and while they clashed, all the the allegiances crumbled, and basically the journey has forced you as a guest out of your village and into the footsteps of this fabled temple called I believe it's called the Yoshimitsu Temple, and it's located deep in the heart of the Sea of Trees, is what we referred it to.
When I went to Japan, I remember me and my brother were walking around, and we were walking through a cemetery as the sun was setting, but these lights started turning on throughout the cemetery, and you could see the animals moving through, and it just had this it was very creepy but beautiful at the same time. So that's kind of what we wanted to capture in that space, is create this really beautiful scene but have it very unnerving as well.
We approached every area as this needs to be in mind with the characters that are going to be in it. This has to be a fun environment for them to work in. So everything, I had an entire spreadsheet of different types of trees I wanted. There were some that were based off bonsai, and then there were some that were based to create certain obstacles as you walked through. And it's just executed perfectly by the props team and everyone else once it was done. And
basically the lore behind this temple is that it has a reputation of the Yude, or the ghost of the dead, and travelers from afar talk about it, about this fabled temple inside the Sea of Trees that's home to ghosts of the dead, and it's also known for their strength and honor, and unquestionable honor, because the clan consists of a brotherhood of samurai warriors that have maintained order and loyalty despite this crazy reputation about this temple that's deep in this dense forest. The travelers, which are our guests, are basically there to seek assistance from the Yoshimitsu clan. And they basically, as they arrive and travel through this dense forest, they arrive at the temple, and they are basically witness to a seppuku, once you witness the seppuku, you get that ghastly warning about entering into the Shadowlands and the creatures that have been unleashed. And as they enter through the temple, they're in a hopeful search for the rest of the clan. But entering the temple, they see the Oni, or the if you would, the Yure, or which is basically like the ghost of the dead, engulf this temple and all of its inhabitants. And as you go through the storyline, you're there, the guests are there to search for the rest of the clan. And as they go through, they find something very sinister has happened. And it's that's where the story takes off, and that's the premise to Shadowlands.
So the second I got in and we started roundtabling this stuff, I freaked out and I got lost in the weeds because it was yokai, it was urban legends, it was Junji Ito, Fatal Frame for sure, for all of the layouts of how things would look in a traditional village, and Silent Hill. And then I have to be pulled back a lot because there was just so much research that went into it. And we basically just hit the ground running. I started drawing whatever Jon would throw at me, and we went from room to room, and I did things like the prop elevations for different aspects of rooms, to the feel, to how each room would be laid out, and what would be inside it, things like that. Well, the funny thing about the archway is I ended up painting the entire thing and working with one of our carpenters at the time, Eddie, to make sure the light actually came through the structure. I did all of the final finish work on it, so I was really lucky to be able to design it with the team and then go through the entire process of the build and then finalize it with carpenters and painters. It's insane to see something you drew come to life, because all of these talented people that work in these departments, like from our fabrication and our scene shops, we're just so excited all the time to make something together. So the first room is 2 duplicate rooms that you would go into, and you'd have the same scene play out for you, and then it would dump everybody into the kind of free-for-all forest. So that way, everything still, while being super fun, had to focus on throughput. So it would be best if we had tried to have 2 of this room achieve the same thing and get people through into the same story at the same time. There weren't many spots in Shadowlands that I think didn't become super altered by production. It was very cut and dry. Here it is. We turned it into a reality, which was absolutely mind-blowing for designing something for the first time. I think it all stems from, again, coming back to the concept of a playground for monsters to work in, because, I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about the monster.
Samurais, in their former lives, they were basically the loyal military guards and servants of the temple of the Yoshimitsu family.
I was one of the samurai. I was actually in the showroom, which 2017 was the last year that they did a showroom in the very beginning of the maze. So basically, I was the one in the front that did the whole thing where it was like, I've lived my life by the sword and now I must die by the sword. Then you chop off the mannequin head. So I was in that room. I was sort of in an isolated little spot on my own, which was very different for me than what I had experienced in the past. And working in a room alone is a really different feeling than being able to kind of play off of other talent and feeding off each other's energy. So it was really just kind of, you had to own that room on your own without any help.
And in Shadowlands, these samurais, with the demons coming in fruition and taking over the inhabitants and the rest of the clansmen inside of this temple, the samurais were one of the last to fall. And what had happened was that these samurais were overtaken by the demons and misconstrued and clouded their vision and made everyone appear as the actual demon yores, the Oni. And so from travelers from afar and other people inside the temples that were possibly not infected by the spirits, these samurais looked at everyone else around them as the yores. So they continued their fight with the clouded vision. And, they're basically forever locked in this battle to retain their honor. And the samurais now waged a war on anyone and with whoever that it takes, because it was necessary to drive their, basically the sword into the body and remove their head, whether or not they were real humans or not, and whether it didn't include each other, which is why you see the samurais battling each other in certain scenes, especially in the finale. But the final remaining samurais is who we see that decided not to go through seppuku, and they basically were taken over by the Oni.
I'm always trying to push boundaries and trying to up whatever I did before. So Shadowlands came after Paranormal. How do I up Paranormal? I saw a big reaction from the stunts and stuff in Paranormal, so I wanted to include that in Shadowlands as well. And I just thought this dude flying back and forth, chopping off people's heads, would have been cool. That's pretty much the extent. But the idea is that's the distraction. That's the big action moment, right? And then you have the other actors in the space. You have the bungee scare as well as the other guys placed around that are getting those scares. But yeah, I just thought that would have been badass. That's about it.
I just really love the finale rooms because it was such a point to create these things and then have the build up and have the payoff. That was such a goal, and they're so huge now in everything moving forward from this maze. It's just a standard that it set the bar. And
you have them going at it like crazy, from coming out of the trees down to cutting each other's heads off. I mean, they're basically choosing to continue their fight, and they don't even know that they're in purgatory. They believe wholeheartedly in their clouded vision and their clouded eyes that they're continuing the good fight, which is why they live by the sword and die by the sword. One of the characters he had was a banshee, or basically the Aoni Yobo, also known as a banshee, which is like an ogre-like spirit. This ogre-like spirit really embodied poverty and misfortune. And it took the appearance of an ancient court noblewoman. And you would see this banshee pop out of the door and try to grab the travelers with their large hands. And so when you go through the maze and you see this animatronic, and it's not even a talent, but this animatronic, this character with large hands, it's crazy, because one of the things that you when you take a close look at it, what Jon did and our props department and our painters did, they did this great incredible treatment that really embodied who and what this character was.
One thing I learned in Paranormal was when you break that safety wall, you're putting people off their game, so that's in Shadowlands. That's why we have the hands that come down the hall. So tried to pepper those things throughout that experience as well.
Young daughter was basically overtaken by a spirit called the Oni Baba. The Oni Baba basically transformed this daughter who was once praised for her gracefulness and her beauty, and transformed her into this shriveled old woman. And she had a maniacal look to her. She had she was basically a disheveled hag with wild looking hair. and she hid in the shadows, whimpering for help. And so in the maze, as you saw this silhouette of this older lady, as you walk through, she would step into the light, revealing your true form, and attack the travelers on the slide rig, which made up for one of the most interesting and pound for pound, one of the best scares in that maze. And that happened to be one of the scares that, on occasion, we would have guests tap out over at Shadowlands, and so that was the Death Hag.
I remember designing the face first, and then the ghost aspect, and like, how is this going to be achieved in the picture? And there was enough hallway space to where she just killed it, and we had really good actors that pulled it off.
So I was one of 4, so we would rotate in the harness. I think it was like 30 on, 30 off kind of deal. And it was a harness on our waists, and it would hook through the back of our costume. And it wasn't like a bungee. I think the whole direction of the effect was supposed to look like you were kind of like, you could crawl and do weird stuff and really contort your body with like the bungee, or not bungee, but the harness. So it wasn't really designed to like pop out. It was more designed to like kind of give you like this floating, creepy effect. And there was actually a door too down that hallway, which was supposed to be the main scare. Was like, you're focusing on the Death Hag in the hallway coming towards you, but then on the side there was a door where one of us would come out too. So there was like a few different ways that you could scare in that hallway. But I think it didn't really work out that way for the longest time. When it did, it was beautiful. In the hallway where I was, there was like a trigger effect, and up until then it wasn't set up, and that night was like the first night that was set up, and it has that really insane scream. And that was cool to experience, like the first night of like, oh, that's what that sounds like. Like we had heard like, okay, you're gonna have a trigger effect, but we didn't know what it was gonna be or sound like. So that was cool.
Our friend Dan works in audio, and he had asked if we would be interested in doing it. I do the spider legs coming out, that's shrill, and then the sound of the girls in the hallway. So like going in there and like literally shutting myself into like this tiny ass fridge and like just screaming my lungs off was just really, really cool.
Turn it up to 11. That sounds great.
Oh, that's me?
Yeah.
The yokai are also known for possessing, inanimate object shape-shifting abilities, and in this case, in Shadowlands, some of the more prominent characters that you saw that look extremely different compared to the other characters was the umbrella and the lantern. And the umbrella and the lantern, there's a nice little backstory to it. This particular room that animated these items is the Kasa Obake, which are mythological ghosts in like Japanese folklore. And in this temple, this temple once had a ton of children. It had all the grandchildren and children of all these noble men and women that the kids all played with each other. They had their own playroom. They just ran freely throughout this whole entire temple. This what they were doing was drawing invitations to this yore that roamed outside the temple walls. And so when they did cross over into the temple walls, once the yore invaded the house, the Kasa Obake appeared and was now drawn to all these energies from these kids calling on these imaginary friends to certain objects. One of the more prominent characters that we had for Shadowlands is the Geisha Performer. Now, the Geisha Performer is, there's a nice little backstory to her, and basically revolves around when the yore invaded the temple. One of the types of creatures called the Jorogumu, this demonic creature of Japanese folklore, basically took over a geisha performer. Now, the geishas of the house of Yoshimitsu were basically female performers that they would basically perform on a nightly basis inside the theater, which is where the guests first see this geisha performing. In a distance, in her movement, it's elegant, it's beautiful. Like all the elite noblemen were obsessed with absolute beauty. So the geishas that resided inside this temple were the movie stars. There were they were the celebrities, if you would, inside this entire temple, and they would perform nightly at this geisha theater. And the shogunates of the household regarded these geishas as pretty much like the highest class of geishas that you could find, and they were called the Taiyu. Now, when the Yorei invaded the gates, the geisha's beauty was the first thing that the spirits noticed. And so the Yorei said, well, you know what? We're going to still allow you. We're fascinated with your beauty, but, we're going to do what we do, and don't worry about us. And they allowed the Jorogumu creature to infest inside them in order to maintain their beauty. But every so now often, when a living force would come out, the Jorogumu creature would come out through the mouth of the geisha, which is why you see these like spider jaws coming on out and creeping on out. For a brief moment, once you enter in, she has that elegant and beautiful quality to her, and you could see it in her movement on stage, which are the incredible talent that we had, like Kat. They would kill it every night. They move just like a geisha would, with so much elegance. But the minute that the guest would turn around and she had her fan covering up her face, that was when that Jorogumu creature came out and would get unsuspecting weary travelers.
I was one of the spider geishas. I was on the stage mostly, but was also in the actual like spider room, where it was, the spider on the track that came out. And then on occasion, if like the room behind it was empty or whatever, I would kind of go in there. But for the most part, I was in the stage room. I really enjoyed being in the opening crew of it. Like, once I got like with the actual like spider face and like the cool makeup that I got from Mackenzie, it was just something that like felt really cool and right. And like the darkness of it and like the grossness of it with the dead bodies and the blood and all that kind of stuff, and like how like I literally had like the blood gel on my face and stuff like that to be like actually nasty and just over the top gross. It was really cool. Me and Heather were the first to use fans in there, and like that was partially expected to use the fans, but how we use them and how we like expanded on it, like we had decided that we were going to learn some fan dances and use those as part of our scares. And like I brought them. I still have them. I painted mine to be like bloody and used that as part of my character and got them approved by Tim. And our leads ended up asking us to teach others how to do the dances and how to use their fans properly and not hit guests and be stupid about them. And it was really cool to help expand it and help make it grow for the years coming after us.
We had these incredible moving blocks. It was almost like a scene from Indiana Jones, right? And so you had these moving blocks that were just crushing people that were trying to leave this temple, or at least reach the end of the temple, which is this incredible, beautiful garden. But before they got to the garden, you had almost this supernatural element to these walls that were trying to prevent wary travelers to escape out of the temple. And inside that room, you came across a decapitated character. Now, this decapitated character was very unique because it was this talent that guests weren't expecting. It was just this decapitated body coming right at you and just convulsing in front of you, banging against the wall. And the character that's in this room, the backstory to this character is it's kind of interesting because when you delve into it, what Jon and the team and what we did was that we really wanted to bring life to this character, and everything connects to one another. Everyone knew each other in this temple. Keep that in mind. We had every nobleman, noblewoman, every elite person that was in here, down to the servants. Everyone knew each other, and this happened to be where when the Yuri took over the temple of Yoshimitsu, they took control of the statues of the legendary Yoshimitsu brothers, because in a portion of the maze, as you get to the end, you'll see this endless pit inside this room where you have statues of the Yoshimitsu brothers. And as the living statues storm through the house, they basically stormed through the house and rounded up all the remaining survivors to sacrifice them in the endless pit. So these statues basically came to life as soon as the Yori invaded these walls, and these statues basically brought everyone else from that temple and threw them down this endless pit. And a handful of the servants were able to escape these captors, right? They're able to escape this pit. So those that were able to escape this pit, they knew where they had to go. They had to leave the temple grounds, and the closest way to exit the temple grounds was through the garden. But in order for them to pass the garden, they had to pass through these walls that somehow just began to move. Now, as they basically try to creep through these moving walls, well, the Yori possessed them before they could even escape through the walls and forced their heads between them as they moved. Now, as their heads were crushed between these moving walls, the servants were now reborn as demons and were reanimated, and now roam the halls of this gauntlet, what we call the gauntlet, searching for its missing head, while reminding the weary travelers that they'll soon find the same fate if they pursued any further. So that's why you see this talent kind of like bumping against the walls, because it's really looking for its head. And so you have this forest that's just full of all these rich and multi-layered spirits, that the ones that just invaded the temple, the Oni and the Yore, they are the ones that really made Shadowlands what it is.
A fun fact, that armor, the original armor of Samurai that we used for the photo shoot that you see for the video shoot, is actually real Samurai armor. What we used for the talent, had was costume armor. What are the armor that I used for the video shoot is probably, I'd say, a good 60 or 70 pounds of full armor, if not more or less. And it had all these intricate buckles and belts and things like that. And it took literally 2 to 3 people to put that armor on.
In my opening night, it actually was kind of awkward. My armor, the shoulder plate, got wedged in between the spinning door and the wall. So I actually was kind of stuck to the wall and couldn't really move my arm. So in that moment, I was just kind of oh shit, what do I do? And I thought I was being really sly and trying to pivot the door out so I could move. But I guess it was actually really obvious that I was doing that.
With everyone that was in the geisha suits, so all the banshees and the geishas, we all had this strap that would go right below our chest, and it was very big and spongy, but it would Velcro in the back, and there's a separation of it, and we would always put snacks in there. Always. There was always I can always count on the girls to have like Cheetos or like Bugles or something like in there, like, hey, you got some gummies, like have a snack. Or like money or whatever, like going back and forth through break rooms, like that was our little purse. It was pretty great.
So I was the shortest one, the shortest death hag. So my feet, like everybody else's feet were like planted on the ground like that. Like I'm so short, I was dangling like this half the time on my tippy toes, like trying to get a scare like that, like trying to walk. Like it was just like, that was like an ongoing thing. Like it was kind of like, in the SpongeBob movie when he's like in the harness and he's just like, like at the end he's singing the Goofy Goober song. It's like at the end of the Goofy Goober song and he's just like hanging from the harness. Like that was me all the time. Like I was just like, okay, I'm here. Like I can get my feet on the ground. But so that was like kind of something that we would always poke at, or I would get poked at about, is that I was so short my feet didn't even touch the ground.
One time where, thank God it was in the dark so nobody saw it, but where you're standing to like cut off the mannequin's head is actually on like a raised platform. And what I would normally do if I had room behind was I would kind of get off the platform and be standing like behind someone else in the room when the lights came back on, so like teleported almost. But I misjudged one time where I was on the platform, so I actually like fell off the platform. So I was like trying to step off, and all of a sudden you just hear like a clang of like the metal armor and like me stumbling around. Thankfully, I like managed to recover and get like against the wall at least before the lights came back on.
Halloween night. We tried to get away with googly eyes on my forehead. It didn't work out. But if we bought the googly eyes and everything. I thought it was funny because like for a scare and the eyes are just going around.
We would have like our like maze meeting before going into the venue, and our TC and our cast lead and our HCs would all gather around, and at the end of like our like pep talk and our hype up, our TC would have the sword, and he would scream, "Live by the sword," and we would all scream back, "Die by the sword." And so that really like kind of got us going every night to like, all right, we're in it, let's do it. So that was fun.
I remember walking through Shadowlands, and last year I used to wear all black, and I used to walk through all the mazes and check out all the shows and check out how the talent was doing in every single one of the mazes, all the streets. And I do that throughout the whole entire night and direct the talent and coordinate with the talent supervisors. And I would go through the mazes, and it's not often that you could scare me. Like the talent would do everything that they could to try to get me to jump. And damn it, Shadowlands was the one maze that would constantly try their hardest to get me. And they were successful at times, and I have to give credit that the one nice little scare that they got me was at the very end. And there were moments where when I would go through and I would have to, if there was guests behind me, I wanted to make sure that I blended in with the guests. And so I would react to the scares, and so then that way the guests, there wasn't a Knott employee in front of them or behind them. I was one with them, and really wanted to do my part in getting the guests involved. So I'd jump with the guests and so on. But damn it, those samurais at the end, I remember I thought I was a badass ninja. I thought since I was wearing all black, I'd back up into the walls to watch the talent, and that's what I would do, right? The talent rarely saw me, and I used to wear all black, and that's what I'm known for at Scary Farm, is who's that dude wearing all black. And I would chill in the shadows and post up and just watch a talent. And 9 times out of 10, the talent didn't see me, not one bit, and I'd be in the maze for like an hour. But I remember I thought I was badass ninja, and I would back up. I backed up, and I didn't see him, but I backed up right into like a samurai, and it was so embarrassing because like the samurai armor was like super tough, and so I thought it was like a wall I was backing up to. So I felt bad, dude. So for that samurai was my bad if I was like backing you up against the wall, and I felt like this small because I was like thinking that I was like the baddest ninja on the planet, and then here I am backing up to a talent, and I can't even imagine what that talent was thinking. Was like, shit, this is my boss, and I don't know what to do right now. So it was very awkward, and I was like, man, I ended up pulling him aside afterwards, and he was in his full garb, and I didn't want to pull him out of the show, but I had to apologize to him. But yeah, it was fun, and it was moments like that I would see. And during that, good is that they would come out of the shadows. You thought that there were statues at one point, but yo, man, they got me. So that was the kind of embarrassing moment in the most recent history with Shadowlands. Is the talent there were just incredible every single night, man. They're some of the best talent that we have, and they were so devoted to their characters that, when you get stuff like that, they had their boss back up into them, and they stayed in character. And that's how good that our talent in Shadowlands was that, they saw a group of customers coming up and these ninja wannabe dudes backing up into them, and he stayed with the statue, didn't move at all until the guest passed me, tapped me on the shoulder, like, hey, John, you're standing on my foot. Sorry, dude.
I think Shadowlands is, in my opinion, by far one of like the most beautiful mazes that Knotts has ever put together. Just visually, like looking at all the decorations and stuff. I don't know. It's still kind of a dark feel like you get from a lot of the mazes, but it's more sort of colorful and I guess vibrant than you get from a lot of other things.
I feel like for a lot of us, it made us learn and grow as monsters. A lot of us were new. It was my second year, so it definitely taught me how to appreciate the makeup, appreciate what goes into the maze and like the look of everything, and what some people had to go through. Like, I was stuck on the stage the whole time, so I had to really get creative, and I think that's a really cool feeling of like actually learning and growing with a maze and then setting it up for future years.
I think we were a really like solid group of people that really wanted to do it justice, and everyone's heart was truly in the right place. We had really good leadership, and we had, any questions we had about it were answered almost like immediately. And, it was definitely a huge group effort to do well every single night and like try to kill it every night and give every person that walked through the doors like something to remember.
That, like, when I said that was a tough one, like that was like, I just remember living in that maze day and night, trying to get all the little details, these stupid moss in the cracks of the rock, like little things that nobody ever noticed, but I feel like is what really makes an attraction feel complete.
Everything we did for that maze was always prefaced with absolute respect for culture and the history of everything we were discovering for that horror or type of horror. And that was my only hope for the maze, was that we achieved something different and unexpected for guests.
There was a definitely a certain level of authenticity that Jon and the team wanted to keep with Shadowlands. We wanted to make sure that not only was it authentic to a certain degree, but we're also being respectful in terms of our depictions and the types of usage that we were using for the characters. It is like many cultures, it's got this rich history that, what we wanted to do was take a creative approach to it and bring a fun, horror-filled, beautiful world to the people at Scary Farm.
ここには神などいない